This video is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. Practice smart and play hard with TrueFire. Hi, this is Keith Williams from 5 Watt World. We're interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. As a guitar history buff, I've always been captivated by the stories around famous guitars that have gone missing, lost, or stolen. So I pulled together my top 10 favorite stories of stolen guitars here to share. So if you always want to know the story of your favorite stolen guitar, you're in the right place, because this is the 5 Watt World short history of the top 10 stolen guitar stories. If you like the style of video, be sure to subscribe. And to support what we do, grab a t-shirt, hoodie, or a 5 Watt World Barber Collaboration overdrive pedal. To become an even bigger part of 5 Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5 Watt on Patreon. There's a friend level for suit any budget. And if you want to have a successful YouTube channel, buy my YouTube Mastery for Musicians course. It's all the things I wish I knew when I started. All the links are in the description. Okay, let's get to the countdown. Number 10, Peter Frampton's Phoenix Les Paul. When Peter Frampton was in Humble Pie, the band played a series of shows at the Fillmore West in San Francisco. Frampton had recently set aside his SG and started using an ES335, but he was wrestling with feedback at concert volumes. A fellow musician and fan of Frampton's named Mark Mariana suggested he try out his modified 1954 Les Paul Custom. Frampton used it for a set and immediately offered to buy the guitar. But Mariana refused to sell, but he said he would like to have Frampton have the guitar as a gift. By the end of the next decade, Frampton had used it on the massive 1976 hit album, Frampton Comes Alive. It's even featured on the cover. Show Me the Way, Do You Feel Like We Do, and Baby I Love Your Way were the soundtrack of 1976. At just 16 years old and learning to drive that summer, I remember it well. Then, in 1980, while on a tour in South America, disaster struck. A cargo plane carrying all of Frampton's gear, including the custom, crashed near Caracas, Venezuela. The plane caught fire and all personnel on board the plane were killed. The guitar was assumed to be lost. And so it was until it was brought into a Caracas luthier named Donald Valentina for a setup. The details of how the guitar had become to have been rescued from the wreckage remain a mystery, but Valentina tried to buy the guitar for years from the person who owned it. Eventually, he was able to purchase the guitar in 2011 for around $5,000. Once Valentina had the guitar, he flew with it to Nashville and returned it to Peter Frampton. The guitar was then taken to the Gibson Custom Shop for repairs, and it remains with Frampton to this day. Frampton dubbed the guitar Phoenix because it rose from the ashes. The Gibson Custom Shop did a run of just 50 copies of the Phoenix guitar in 2015, aged by Tom Murphy. And then in 2021, there was a model released in the Forever collection, implying that it will continue to be available. Number 9, Jeff Beck's Sunburst 1959 Les Paul. On July 21, 1969, Jeff Beck's band was appearing at the Tamarack Lounge in the Hudson River Valley town of Ellenville, New York. They were out on the road to support his Beckola record. The band consisted of Beck, singer Rod Stewart, Ron Wood on bass, and drummer Tony Newman. According to Newman, Beck riled up the audience by spraying them with a fire extinguisher, after which security quickly rushed the band off stage. While the gear was unattended, someone made off with some of that gear, including Beck's 1959 Burst Les Paul. Beck had bought the guitar from Rick Nielsen. Yes, that Rick Nielsen, later of Cheap Trick fame. Prior to Cheap Trick, Nielsen was an early guitar collector before the term vintage had come into use. He simply bought and sold great used guitars. Among his regular customers, Beck had purchased the 1959 Les Paul for $300 in 1968, and he went on to use it with the Jeff Beck Group. The guitar had disappeared until 2000 when it was located by Perry Margouleff, a Long Island musician and vintage guitar dealer. Margouleff was anxious to buy the guitar but wanted Beck's blessing to do so. He says he received that permission on a phone call with Beck. Margouleff paid $75,000 to an undisclosed dealer for the guitar. But then in January 2018, Beck's manager notified Margouleff that his client wanted the Les Paul back. When the parties failed to reach a resolution, Margouleff filed a suit seeking a judgment that Beck had abandoned and waived any claim to the instrument. Beck's lawyer claims that the 2000 phone conversation with Beck never took place. Thus began a he said over who is the Burst's rightful owner, a question that, to date, has not been settled. Beck died in January of 2023, adding a new wrinkle to the matter. The guitar remains in Margouleff's possession. Number 8, Billy Corgan's Gish Stratacaster. In 1991, the Smashing Pumpkins would record their debut album, Gish. At those sessions, singer-guitarist Billy Corgan's main guitar was his prized Fender Stratocaster. Touring on the success of the record, the next year in December of '92, the Pumpkins were playing a show in Detroit, and sometime after the gig, that prized Stratocaster was stolen. There were rewards offered up to $20,000 for the return of the guitar with no questions asked, but there was no response. Fully 27 years later, in 2019, Corgan was contacted by a mom from Flushing, Michigan, named Beth James. She said that she'd bought a guitar at a garage sale a decade earlier for $200. She didn't even play guitar. She just bought it to hang it on the wall. She'd been cleaning out her house and had looked into the value of the guitar. The guitar had a number of unique features. The initials KM were engraved in the bridge. There was a cigarette burn on the neck, and the middle pickup had been adjusted down flush with the pickguard. Billy had added his own touches to the guitar, including the word scratched into the paint. James' research led to identifying the guitar, and in 2019, Corgan was reunited with the guitar. Corgan had never really looked into the guitar's history before, so he took it to Chicago luthier Jeff Benge to put it in shape to be played. According to Benge, the guitar is from Fender's CBS era, with the neck stamped as a 76 and the pickup stated as coming from 75. Corgan wasted no time and took the guitar into the studio to work on their 2020 album, Sear. Corgan said at the time, "I'm in the studio working on new songs, and I literally am going to go take it, have it strung up and checked, and put it to work right away. I mean, that's what guitars are for." I couldn't agree more. Number 7. Jaco Pastorius' 1962 fretless jazz bass. No doubt one of, if not the most influential electric bassists of all time, Jaco Pastorius' instrument was a 1962 Fender jazz bass. In the early 70s, Jaco acquired the 62 Jazz that became known as the Bass of Doom, on which he recorded most of his best-known music. Reversing the direction Leo Fender started with the precision bass, he pulled the frets out of the fingerboard, filled the fret slots with wood putty, then to protect the fingerboard from the Rotosound round-wound strings he used, he coated it with several layers of marine epoxy. This created a smooth, hard surface that gave his bass a unique and singing quality. In particular, he used it on his self-titled Jaco Pastorius album. Released exactly 25 years after the release of the first Fender bass in 1951, the electric bass would never be the same again. He'd mastered both the use of natural and artificial harmonics as a way of extending the range of the bass. This was enhanced by his heavy use of the bridge pickup and added to his use of the fretless with its ability to slide between notes to create fluid lines. He would play double stops that helped fill out his parts like Hendrix had done on guitar. And also following in Hendrix's footsteps, he developed a huge and flamboyant stage presence. Between his time in the band Weather Report and also as a solo artist, by the early 80s, Jaco's struggles with addiction had landed him on hard times. I've heard the story a few different ways. Some say the bass was stolen, and others say that Jaco gave the bass away, and still others that it was left in Central Park on a bench. But in 1982, the bass passed from Jaco's hands, and 5 years later, he passed away. And for many years, there wasn't a word of it except for the rumor that it was in the hands of a collector in New York. Then, in 2006, it reappeared in a music store in New York with a hefty price tag. Robert Trujillo of Metallica bought the bass with the intention that it would live with the Pastorius family. Himself a bassist, Pastorius' son Felix said, "This bass was like a lost relative. It was something that I'd been around all my life in terms of listening to and hearing stories about, but I'd never met this thing, you know?" Trujillo owns the bass, and thanks to him, it is now in the possession of the Pastorius family. Number 6. John Lennon's J160E. George Harrison and John Lennon bought their matching Gibson Jumbo J160Es at the same time. The guitars were purchased at Rushworth's Music House in Liverpool on September 10, 1962. Beatles manager Brian Epstein paid £161 for each guitar, about $450 then, or about $4,600 today. Lennon used the guitar extensively on the early Beatles recordings, often plugging it straight into their Vox amps. He used the guitar as a main writing tool as well, penning such Beatle classics as "I Saw Her Standing There," "She Loves You," and "I Want to Hold Your Hand." Eventually, some say accidentally maybe, Harrison and Lennon swapped guitars. But due to events, Lennon used the guitar for a relatively short time. After the Beatles' holiday concert in 1963, the guitar was left behind by the band's longtime roadie, Mal Evans. The guitar was then missing for 4 years until it appeared in a shop in San Diego in 1967. It was traded in with some other gear and then sold for $175 to a local bluegrass musician who owned it for a short time before selling it to a childhood friend, John McCaw. McCaw used the guitar for the next 4 decades. In April of 2014, McCaw saw an article in Guitar Aficionado magazine that had a foldout of all of Harrison's guitars. Noticing how close the serial number of Harrison's 160E was to his, he contacted Beatles gear author and authority Andy Babiuk, who examined the guitar and authenticated that it was in fact Lennon's missing guitar. McCaw realized that he couldn't keep such a historic instrument, and on November 9, 2015, the guitar was sold by Julien's Auctions for 3 times the estimated $800,000 price they anticipated. The famous guitar was sold for a record-shattering $2.41 million. I've been using TrueFire for years, so they're the perfect partner for 5-Watt World. Like a lot of guitar players, I'm interested in lots of kinds of music, and TrueFire always has something to scratch the itch I have for learning more about guitar. To take full advantage of the variety, I've always subscribed to the All Access Pass, which lets me use everything in the TrueFire catalog. As a viewer of 5-Watt World, you can get an exclusive 50% discount on the All Access Pass, or you can get 35% off any course in the catalog by using the dedicated links in the description. I've learned a lot from TrueFire, and I'm confident you can too. Sign up using the link in the video description to support 5-Watt World and get some great lessons at the same time. Practice smart and play hard with TrueFire. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. Okay, now the home stretch. Number 5, George Harrison's 360 12-string Rickenbacker. George Harrison used 2 different Rickenbacker 12-string guitars with the Beatles. The first was given to him by Rickenbacker president Francis C. Hall on February 8, 1964, after the rehearsals for The Ed Sullivan Show. It was the second Rickenbacker 12-string ever built. The guitar went on to play a large role in the sound of the subsequent A Hard Day's Night album. The second was gifted to him by the Minneapolis music store B Sharp Music prior to the Beatles' August 1965 show at Old Met Stadium. After hearing of Harrison's love for the Rick 12s, the store ordered one for him to have in stock. It was a later model 360 with the rounded edges rather than the sharper corners seen on the 1964 model. It also had the checkerboard binding instead of the plain white binding of the first guitar. According to Andy Babiuk's Beatles Gearbook, Harrison put the guitar to use in the studio on the Beatles' next album, Rubber Soul, where it can be heard on the chiming lick to If I Needed Someone. He played the guitar in concert on many occasions over the next year, including on the Beatles' last tour. It's been suggested over the years that the 65 Rick was stolen along with his Gretsch Tennessean during the January 1965 sessions for Let It Be. But more likely, the guitar was stolen sometime after the Beatles concluded their last U.S. tour in August of '66 at San Francisco's Candlestick Park, and prior to Harrison's first trip to India to study sitar with Ravi Shankar. Finding the guitar has been difficult in part because B Sharp Music didn't record the serial number. Rickenbacker CEO John Hall has said there are 5 different 1965 360 12 strings that are possibilities, based on the shipping records. A guitar bearing one of the 5 serial numbers has surfaced, but whether it's Harrison's or not is unknown. It remains missing to the present day. Number 4, Jimmy Page's Black Beauty Custom Les Paul. Known for playing Les Pauls, both Jimmy Page's number 1 and number 2 guitars are 1959 bursts. But his first Les Paul was a 1960 3-pickup Les Paul Custom. Page bought the guitar from Lou Davis Music in London for £185 via their layaway plan. He was just 18 years old. Already doing a lot of session work at that point, he chose the 3-pickup option to give him more tonal choices. Page was playing up to 3 sessions a day, and the custom was used on Donovan's Sunshine Superman, Petula Clark's Downtown, The Who's debut I Can't Explain, and tracks by Tom Jones, The Kinks, Marianne Faithfull, and the Rolling Stones. Owning this custom almost kept him from buying his number 1 Les Paul from Joe Walsh when it was offered to him in April of '69. This is during one of Led Zeppelin's earliest U.S. tours. Page is said to have replied to Joe's offer, "I already have a Les Paul," before trying the guitar and falling in love with it. Page had been playing his Telecaster on that tour, but switched to the number 1 Les Paul after purchase. For this reason, he didn't bring the Black Beauty on tour with Zeppelin until 1970. The guitar was last used at the band's performance at the Met Stadium in Minneapolis, Minnesota on April 12, 1970. But when the band landed in Montreal, Canada for the next gig, the guitar was gone. Page was distraught and took out ads in music magazines offering a reward for the return of the guitar to no avail. For over 20 years, the guitar remained hidden, but in 1993, the guitar was purchased by Willie's American Guitars in St. Paul for $5,000. The woman selling the guitar said her husband had been a baggage handler at the airport and had stolen the guitar, saying that it had belonged to Jimmy Page. To verify this, the store contacted Jimmy Page confidant Perry Margouleff, but in the end they were told that the guitar lacked holes for two small switches that Page had added and the Bigsby they had also added to the guitar. So it was sold to an employee who played it for the next 20 years. When the guitar came in for a headstock repair, a black light was used on the paint and the spots where the original holes were showed up. Willys again reached out to Margouleff, and along with a matching unique stripe in the 12th fret inlay, the guitar was identified as being Page's long-lost custom. The employee was willing to give up the guitar, so Page and Margouleff found a clean 1960 custom with a Bigsby and made the swap. The 1960 custom was valued at about $70,000 at the time. Margouleff hand-carried the guitar to Page in England. This was all done rather quietly, but fans noted that the custom was one of the 7 guitars that Page had in the Play It Loud exhibition at New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art in 2019. Number 3. Paul McCartney's Hamburg Hoffner bass. Vanishing around the time the Beatles broke up, the Hoffner, dubbed the most important bass guitar in history, would turn up 50 years later. Alternately referred to as the Hamburg bass or the Cavern Club bass, it was the instrument McCartney used in the early years of the Beatles. The bass gets its nickname from where McCartney bought the bass. He purchased it at Hamburg, Germany in 1962 at the Steinway Music House. As Paul recalled later, "There was this bass which was quite cheap. I couldn't afford a Fender. Even then, they seemed to be costing about £100. All I could really afford was about £30. So for about £30 I found this Hoffner violin bass. And to me it seemed like, because I was left-handed, it looked less daft because it was symmetrical. Didn't look as bad as a cutaway which was up the wrong way. So I got into that." Paul used the bass throughout their run at Liverpool's Cavern Club, and this is where the second nickname comes from. Eventually, Paul got a second Hoffner which he preferred using, but the Hamburg Hoffner was later extensively refinished and remained in use as a backup into 1969. The story of how the bass was stolen differs. At one point, it was allegedly taken out of the closet during the sessions for Let It Be at Abbey Road, along with several other Beatles guitars. There were rumors that the guitar was residing in Ottawa, Canada, or, most recently, that it was stolen from the back of a van in October of 1972 in the Notting Hill area of London, 3 years after the breakup of the band. It was the publicity around the documentary Let It Be in 2024 that this last version of the story yielded a breakthrough. Someone living on the south coast of England remembered an old bass guitar up in the attic. From pictures in the media, they soon realized what they had, as there were modifications that were unique to that instrument. Within a few days, it was back with McCartney. McCartney's official website announced, "The guitar has been authenticated by Hoffner, and Paul is incredibly grateful to all those involved." Number 2. George Harrison's Lucy Les Paul. George Harrison's Lucy Les Paul had a full life before it ever landed in his hands. The gold top 57 had belonged to John Sebastian of the U.S. folk rock group The Lovin' Spoonful, who then sold it to Rick Derringer of the McCoys. By that point, the guitar had significant road wear, so Derringer decided to send it to Gibson to have it refinished in the cherry red they were using on their SGs. When he got it back, he didn't like the result, so he sold it to Dan Armstrong in New York. It was there that it was bought by Eric Clapton, who then gave it to his best friend, George Harrison, in August of 1968. George was the one that dubbed it Lucy, for the then popular red-headed actress Lucille Ball. And that's how Clapton would end up playing Lucy on Harrison's tune While My Guitar Gently Weeps on the Beatles' White Album. Supposedly, George asked Eric to come by to say hi, and when he got there, the Les Paul and Marshall rig he preferred was all set up and ready to go. 5 years later, George's home in Beverly Hills was broken into and the guitar was stolen. It was tracked to Wayland Sound City on Sunset Boulevard, but by the time the police got there, it had already been sold. This was despite a law requiring a 30-day waiting period placed on used guitars. The guitar had been sold to one of Mexico's best-known guitar players, Miguel Ochoa, who was on holiday in L.A. Ochoa had no idea that the guitar was stolen and was planning to return to Mexico that day. He'd left the number of where he was staying on the sales receipt. But when Harrison called, Ochoa thought it was a joke, and he hung up on him and headed off to catch his flight. A back and forth ensued where Ochoa didn't want to be paid in cash, but instead asked for a Sunburst Les Paul and a precision bass instead. The deal was done, and the guitar was returned. Harrison liked to joke that Lucy had been kidnapped, as it was gone for such a short time. He still owned the guitar at the time of his death in 2001. And as a footnote, in September of 2022, the 1958 Les Paul Burst that Ochoa got in the trade was sold at auction for $312,500. And number 1, Eric Clapton's Bino Les Paul. Easily the most famous stolen guitar has to be Eric Clapton's 1960 Burst Les Paul. Dubbed the Bino Burst because it's the guitar he used on the seminal 1966 John Mayall and the Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton record, where Clapton is reading the Bino comic book on the cover. Inspired by the tones on Freddie King's Let's Hide Away and Dance Away, Clapton went searching for a Les Paul like King's. In the end, he bought a humbucking-equipped Les Paul at Lou Davis Music in London near the beginning of June in 1965. Andy Summers had heard that there were two Les Pauls at the shop, and they went down and bought them both, each for around 200 pounds. Clapton modified the guitar, replacing the original Kluson tuners with Grovers, and by removing the pickup covers near the end of the year, revealing the bobbins, double white at the neck and double black in the bridge. Clapton was at the peak of his powers in the Blues Breakers at this time, with Clapton as God graffiti appearing around London. Clapton's fire was captured on those historic sessions between the 27th and 31st of March 1966 at Decca Records Studios. But by the time the album was released in June, the mercurial Clapton was already rehearsing with his new band, the blues rock trio Cream, at a church hall in Brondesbury, northwest London. It was there that the Les Paul was stolen, before Clapton had even been able to use it with the new band on either a recording or in a public performance. Clapton theorized that whoever stole the guitar had returned the week following and stole the plush case as well. There was some publicity at the time, but the guitar didn't turn up. Clapton badgered his friend Summers until Andy relented and sold him his Burst for the same 200 pounds he'd paid for it. Finding the Bino Burst seems difficult. The serial number and year are not known with certainty. Debate rages about whether it's a 60 or a late 59, and there are only some 20 photos of the guitar, most of which are grainy, so matching the wood or fretboard markers is difficult. Noted guitarist and collector Joe Bonamassa told Guitarist magazine in 2016 that the guitar is, quote, in a collection on the east coast of America. That's all I can tell you, and that's all I will say. Clapton has said repeatedly that he, quote, never really found one as good as that. I do miss that one. Despite Joe's claims, almost a decade later, the guitar's location has never been disclosed. And they're not really a guitar stolen story. I thought the story of Joe Perry's 59 Les Paul would make a good ending to this list. In the early years of Aerosmith, Joe Perry's main guitar was his 1959 Les Paul. Aerosmith had been one of the biggest rock bands in the world in the mid-70s, but by the end of the decade, they had fallen on truly hard times. Fueled by the drugs and rock lifestyle, Perry found himself in a bad place and he'd leave Aerosmith in '79. Around Christmas time of that year, he needed money, had been playing mostly Strats lately in any case, and he knew he could sell the rare guitar quickly. So he sold it to a guitar shop that he knew there in Boston for a reported $4,500. An employee at the shop bought it and later sold it to a guitar collector, Jerry Baudouin. Perry got sober soon after his divorce in '82, and in '84 they put Aerosmith back together. But in '84, Baudouin sold the guitar again, this time to none other than Eric Johnson. Finding out the guitar's history, Johnson offered to sell the guitar back to Perry, but Perry didn't have the money at the time, and EJ ended up selling the guitar to Dixie Guitars in Atlanta. And so it was that Tut Campbell at Dixie Guitars that sold that guitar to Slash in '89 for a reported $8,000. Years later, Brad Whitford recognized the guitar in a magazine photo of Slash's guitar collection and showed it to Perry. At that point, Perry was in better shape financially, and he offered to buy the guitar from Slash. But by then, the guitar had become part of Slash's guitar story as well, so he kept politely refusing to sell. He used it on recordings, and he played it very visibly in the Guns N' Roses video for November Rain. Then, in 2000, at Perry's 50th birthday party, Cheap Trick was playing, and Perry was sitting in with them. Halfway through the set, his guitar tech walked up and handed him the 59 as a gift from Slash. Slash had decided that it was time to reunite Perry with this iconic guitar from his past. On Conan O'Brien's talk show, Perry said of the gift from Slash, "His heart is so big, I don't know how it fits in his chest." The guitar remains in Perry's possession. Whenever the guitar is used, it's assigned its own security staffer who stays with the road case from the moment it leaves the truck until it's handed to the guitar tech for the night show or the recording session. In 2014, Gibson did a run of 100 replica Joe Perry custom shop Les Pauls. And that's a great way to end this list with one of my favorite lost and found guitar stories of famous players. So what's your favorite stolen guitar story? Put it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. If you like this video, you'd probably enjoy my short history of the Les Paul Burst guitars. I need to thank Wildwood Guitars for permission to use the clip of Greg Koch playing the Joe Perry replica guitar. I need to thank Jeff McErlane for the clips of him playing his Bino Best on the intro and outro of the video, originally recorded for our video Bino on a Budget. I want to thank everyone that stopped by the online store and grabbed some merch or a 5-watt World Barber Electronics Collaboration overdrive pedal. You keep the channel going. In particular, I need to thank my friends of 5-watt on Patreon. It's the guitar community I've always wanted. You're all 5-watt World. I just make the videos. If you like the style of video, be sure to subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Thanks for hanging with me until the end. Until next time, I'm Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5-watt World.